If you guys have not subscribed to Arnie, please take 1 second out of your day. 616 people here. If you care at all about Palantir, you will only get value from this channel. Arnie's investing. I'm putting it in the chat right now. Please, please, please subscribe to this channel. And also PalantirBolts.com, the best Substack in the world.
CEO Alex.
About Palantir. Look at that volume. That volume is great. This is going to be great. All right, here's Fox. Here's Alex Karp on Fox Business. And again, please subscribe to Arnie for getting us this video. Arnie, thank you for this. Here we go.
Karp, just in the chair right now. He was the first major executive of a Western company to go to Kyiv and meet with Zelensky after the Russian invasion. He joins us live now from Palantir's Software Government Conference Summit in D.C. Alex, thank you for coming.
It's a delight to be here, as always.
Thank you. What do you, I have to right off the bat. What do you make of not just Senator Rand Paul, but many others in Congress digging in their heels over funding for Ukraine? You know, I mean, this looks like a real stalemate, and we've got 8 days before the government loses funding.
Well, look, I mean, we live in a country where we have First Amendment rights. I'm kind of a First Amendment rights zealot. I think everyone should express their opinion. My opinion is that you create peace through technological superiority. We have to show the rest of the world, especially our adversaries, but also our allies, that we can deliver the most important and powerful weapon systems to allies and project power into regions that are dangerous. And, you know, obviously, you know, look, I've spent 20 years with people disagreeing with me on supporting the DoD in Silicon Valley, where it's not popular. And, you know, of course, there are some people who think that you will make the world safer through, you know, not confronting our adversaries. And it's a legitimate position. I disagree with it.
On the battlefield, just so people understand what Palantir is able to do there, you've been key in the target coordination cycle, so to speak. You help the Ukrainians find and track the target, whether that's a Russian tank column or a weapons depot. And then the decision to act is made by humans on the ground. In days gone by, that cycle took hours. With Palantir's engagement, it takes, what, like 2 to 4 minutes. A lot of GOP members are China hawks. What's the likelihood that the success Ukraine has had using Palantir technology might have a chilling effect on China as it mulls positions on how to deal with Taiwan? I mean, as a deterrence, you guys could be that.
Well, you know, obviously we have a massive presence in the U.S. government, most of which we can't talk about. What I think will be a deterrent to China is, to the extent America, which really has nearly every company in the AI software field that is world leading, transformative, these technologies have to be made available for the DoD. Currently, there's no requirement of tech companies in the West to supply our technology to our DoD. We need to change that. We need to reform the culture of Silicon Valley so that people enthusiastically support deterrent efforts. And we need to limit the export of these technologies to our adversaries. So, you know, I have my own myopic interests of, like, you know, supporting our nearly bombastic growth in U.S. commercial. But what I care about as a citizen is we are in most industrial revolutions, people participate relatively evenly according to GDP. In this revolution, it's really the U.S. and no other country in the world. How do we maintain the military superiority that is great as our intellectual and moral superiority vis-a-vis our adversaries? And we do that by limiting exports, forcing all tech companies to sell any product they develop to the DoD, and by all of us engaging in helping our Defense Department, both intellectually, philosophically, and of course, with our technologies that can and should be used as weapons of war to scare the bejeebers out of our adversaries.
Well, that would be Russia too. And you at Palantir absolutely do not do business with Russia or China. But what is the danger of not supporting Ukraine in its fight against Russia, whether it's with your battlefield technology or something else?
Well, you know, I mean, look, obviously, I believe that any sign of weakness will beget violence, danger, both more danger in Europe and more danger all across the globe. So, And we believe this at Palantir. It's not just that we sell to the DoD. It's not just that our products are crucial to national security across the Western world. We are a belief-driven organization. So it's not surprising that I believe that. It's also not surprising that European countries, one of the things that is not well known, but the European countries that border Russia, they believe this. So typically people who are in a dangerous border or perceive the danger have clear minds on this. But, we are a diverse country politically, and we have to bring the argument to our peers that we believe, that if we don't maintain a superiority in our military technology context, we will all suffer.
Well, you guys have harnessed AI to remove some of the friction on the battlefield, and it's been really game-changing. Of course, last week, Senator Chuck Schumer invited top tech leaders, you included, to the Senate, and there was a behind-closed-doors conversation about sort of guardrails or ring fencing as far as regulation is concerned of AI. And this isn't necessarily with the battlefield, but perhaps in the enterprise world or social media, et cetera. There were no independent scientists, as we understand it, in the room. And there were some complaints that that's almost like letting the fox guard the hen house. You guys are capitalists, and that's understandable. You're in it to make money. And we've seen in the past where there was digging in heels with the social media guys, Zuckerberg, obviously Elon Musk, and everybody else in there. They did not want to see regulation. So what is the answer to that? Don't you think that there should be some independent voices?
Well, of course, no one believes you when you're making money that you'll argue against your pocketbook. Let me argue against my pocketbook. I think we do need regulation. We need regulation to prevent the risk to our civilization should AI become uncontrollable. We need some form of regulation to make sure that governance ensures the privacy of our data, for example, in healthcare context, that reduces abuses that include discrimination. It is true that I have a capital interest, but I would say my primary interest and the interest I advocated for in that room were about national security. And I did not advocate purely for buying Palantir, although we obviously, in my view, have the best software products in the world. I advocated for more, well, we don't have to advocate. If it's true, that would be a legitimate pushback. But I advocated for reducing exports of our technology to adversarial countries, for requiring every enterprise in America to sell their technology to the DoD. So no more of this BS. I make a ton of money in America, but I can't somehow work with the DoD. And an intellectual engagement on these ethical issues. And it is true that there are conflicts of interest, no doubt, but it's also true you need the technical experts on this. And one of the ways you prove you're a technical expert on technology is building something that works. And something that works in this context is very, very valuable. So you are going to need people who've actually built things. Now, I personally think my impression of the room is there were a lot of independent data ethics experts in the room who were not capitalists and don't intend to become capitalists. And I think Leader Schumer did a really good job of bringing people in a room who otherwise would never be there. But of course, yeah.
You were seated next to Elon Musk. A lot has been made about that. And Palantir's warfare system uses this Meta constellation platform, which basically tasks hundreds and hundreds of satellites to get their imagery and then feed that down to the battlefield. I'd just like to know, are you still using Starlink? I know you have before. That's Elon Musk's SpaceX satellite constellation. And I ask that because he's kind of fanboyed over, Vladimir Putin. He said some very, very sort of lovely things about that autocrat. It's a little disturbing, especially considering Putin has been somebody, again, free speech. I get Elon can talk about that, but you're still using the Starlink satellites?
Yes. I have a variant view on this. If you go to a surgeon, you don't agree with them, and they're the best surgeon, you still go to them. And I know Elon. I like him. I think he's a super important entrepreneur. We don't have to agree on everything. His products work. I am in the business of delivering. You could ask him, will you stop using Palantir because because Karp is going to support Ukraine? I will use the best products available on the market to help our allies and hurt our adversaries. And for me, if you're supplying the product, I will use it. And you do not have to agree with me as long as the technology is reliable on the battlefield.
Okay.
And I'm very happy to fight you intellectually over a cup of coffee, a beer, or a run.
Okay. How about chocolate? Hot chocolate.
All right. Wow. Let's talk a little bit about that interview and then we'll end it off here. That's Karp said some very interesting things. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. The last thing he talked about, then we'll get to the stuff he said at the top. So on Elon Musk, the reporter kind of tries to get a little gotcha moment. I mean, it was I like that reporter. I think her name is Liz. She's really good. That was a weird question. So basically, Elon has said some things on X in the past about how we need to end the war and we need to give Russia some part of land. Ukraine takes some part of land. Boom, you end it, right? People stop dying. And people have viciously gone after Elon Musk because they basically said, oh, you're supporting Putin. You're supporting a dictatorial regime because you want the war to end. And he's like, no, the whole world needs to move on and Ukraine's going to have to give up something. Otherwise, Putin's not going to stop. So let's just be adults here and let's end it. You can agree with that politically, disagree with that. It's up to you. But nonetheless, he's made that pretty clear. That's his choice. To say that he agrees with Putin killing journalists and suppressing free speech in his country because he wants the war to end, which might mean you have to give up some stuff to a dictatorship because that's how a war ends. Eventually, you have to come to a conclusion. Is not just a stretch. It's blatantly false. I mean, that's a really, really weird assertion that she put out there. I guess she's trying to get a gotcha question, but you could tell Karp was visibly just like, what? Like, are you serious? That's a real question you're asking me right now? Not the best question in my opinion, but also it was an easy layup for Karp to be like, this is just a bad argument at the end of the day. Obviously, Elon buying Twitter and unleashing free speech at scale to the point where he's losing 60% of his ad revenue kind of shows he cares about it. He just can't control the entire world and get Russia to also care about it as well. So that part I think was really interesting. Karp says if you don't agree with the best surgeon, but they're the best surgeon, you go to the surgeon. I thought that was a great line. So Palantir is confirmed to be using Starlink products. We knew that in the past, but Karp officially said today we are definitely using Starlink, and it seems like Meta Constellation will continue to use Starlink and probably use it in Ukraine. Final part of that interview says, Karp says, I wonder if you ask Elon if he'll stop using Palantir. I don't know if that was a metaphor, if that was kind of this like, just flipping the analogy on the reporter, or if he was legitimately saying, ask Elon if he'll stop using our software, and he kind of just let it out because maybe either Tesla or SpaceX, I would argue SpaceX over Tesla, might be using Palantir. Remember, the Tesla link to Palantir is that Palantir is integrated within Panasonic's smart factories in Las Vegas and now expanding to Kansas. Those smart factories make the 4680 batteries for Tesla. So there is a way to kind of link them. Doesn't mean they're necessarily using them. I don't know if that was a term of art Karp's using or they actually use Palantir. But I wouldn't be surprised to see a company like SpaceX using Palantir. So we'll eventually see if that was happening. Some people in the chat saying, I think that was a metaphor, but please let it be real. Yeah, it might be a metaphor, but we'll see. Maybe it was real. Okay, some of the other stuff Karp said I want to recover real quick. So he said Ukraine aid is important. Whether you agree with Ukraine aid or don't agree with Ukraine aid, obviously Palantir and Alex Karp agree with being an ally to Ukraine. They were the first Western public company to go to Ukraine, give them the aid, basically gave it to them for free. I don't know if they've even monetized a single cent of the money they were able to make, or the money they could have been able to make for providing the software to Ukraine. Maybe they got it, maybe they didn't, but nonetheless, they definitely agree with the government's ability to fund Ukraine. And I think they also think in the context of national interest, that will be good for Palantir long term. One of the other interesting points Karp said was about what is the deterrent to China. And this I thought was one of the most interesting part of the interviews. He said, we need the DoD to step up their budget. And I have two primary things that the DoD has to start doing, or the government in general has to start imposing on American companies. Number one, you have to reduce your exports to bad countries. So basically he's saying, I don't work with Russia. I don't work with China. Palantir has never worked with Russia and China. Why is Google, Facebook, Amazon, why are they all clamoring to work with Russia and China? Now, obviously, I don't think the United States will ever stop an American tech company from exporting their influence into other nations. That would be a little bit too much in my opinion. But one of his arguments is like, why are we allowed to just support that dictatorial regime? We say we're afraid of China and Russia from a geopolitical perspective, but then we're giving them all the tools and services because of free democracy in the United States that we've been able to innovate because of that democracy, shipping it to authoritarian regimes. You can agree or disagree, but Karp says that that is not a good thing to be happening. And second of all, which is something he's been saying for the past couple months now, You have to force American companies to sell to the DoD. So what he's saying here is like, look, if the Department of Defense wants to maintain its competitive advantage with the United States over all of these other countries in regards to AI and ethically use AI, then you should be forcing the best companies in the world that originate in, guess where, the United States, to be able, or not to be able, but to be forced to sell to the DoD. So the perfect example of this is when Google turned down a $229 million Project Maven contract with the US government because there were employees in Google that work on monetizing, advertising, and optimizing your ad clicks all day that said, we don't feel ethical about this contract. Palantir took that $229 million and said, we'll do it because we choose democracy. And so as a result of that, Karp's argument is like, look, if we want to stay competitive in the AI race, there is no world in which American companies are selling to Russia and China, but they're not selling to the American government. And as a result of that, obviously the interest of the DoD defense budget will increase for software, for technology. Karp's been saying it's got to go to at least 2% for the past couple months now. And I think eventually that will happen. And if that does happen, obviously Palantir is going to benefit from that. Karp uses the phrase, let me argue against my pocketbook. And I think he's being genuine about this. Karp, for those that don't know, is a socialist. I mean, politically, he's described himself as very progressive, even though he is a capitalist as well. He deeply agrees with this idea of making sure people are equal and making sure people are wealthy and healthy. But he also agrees, in the context of capitalism and being able to have free enterprise. So when he says, let me argue against my pocketbook, I think he's definitively saying, I was at that White House summit because I care about the ethical use of AI for national security. And if I believe in that, then that will eventually, the byproduct of it, if we are correct on where the direction is for where it's going, will benefit Palantir. And he makes a joke about it by saying, if we are correct on the trajectory of AI being used for national security, that means the DoD, the government, is going to start spending on AI for national security, which means they're going to need to procure the best products within AI for national security. And he starts laughing, saying, well, that's us, right? So yes, I'm a capitalist in that I think that'll help Palantir and Palantir shareholders, but at the end of the day, I just want the US to be able to procure software correctly. Remember when they sued the Army in 2011, they did not sue them to buy Palantir software. They sued them to meritocratically procure software, because back in 2000 to 2010, it was all, I know this guy, I know that guy, he's on the board of that company, and boom, that's how you procure software, which was a horrible way, definitely an anti-competitive way to stay relevant in the 21st century when it comes to defense tech. And so Palantir and that lawsuit set the precedent for companies to actually have the best product and then be able to get money from the government because they were forced by the courts to buy the best software, and that just ended up being Palantir. And so that was the kind of core point that Karp was trying to make. The final thing I'll say here is that he says we have bombastic growth in U.S. commercial. Karp's been saying this for a long time, right? That U.S. commercial is growing very well. In the CNBC interview yesterday, he said that U.S. commercial is also growing very well, but the problem is with international European growth, because those companies are just not as accepting to the innovation that is going on in regards to AI. So the kind of summary to the interview is, he says Ukraine aid is important. Bombastic growth in U.S. commercial makes a lot of sense. The primary interest of the U.S. government should be to stop exporting software to bad countries and start forcing companies in the United States to sell to their own government. He likes Elon Musk, respects him, doesn't agree with him on everything, but still will use Starlink for meta constellation, and potentially is teasing that Elon Musk, or some company Elon Musk operates, may be using Palantir, even if that was just a metaphor.